Project 2025, the 900-plus page Heritage Foundation playbook for the next Republican administration. You've heard about what it means for your health care and your free speech rights, but here's a question. What does it mean for your student loans? Hi, I'm Roto, and this is the Fair Share Files. Crafted by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, the Project 2025 presidential playbook advocates for everything from revoking the National Education Association's federal charter to abolishing the Department of Education altogether. But today, let's zoom in for a bit and take a look at what Project 2025 means for those of you who rely on student loans to fund your own or your child's education. First, let's talk about public service loan forgiveness. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program was established in 2007 by George W. Bush when he signed into law the College Cost Reduction and Access Act. The bill was passed with bipartisan support, 215 Democratic and 77 Republican votes in the House, and 43 Democratic and 13 Republican votes in the Senate. It provided for, among other priorities, forgiveness of student loans for public service employees after 10 years of service and 120 qualifying repayments. The idea behind the program was that individuals working in public service professions, such as teachers, police officers, firefighters, and social workers, were providing a valuable service to the community, and that investment in their education serves the community as a whole. As President Biden said in an email to recipients of the program, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is an important way to bring more Americans into public service and to help them get out from under the burden of student loan debt. For Biden, as for George W. Bush, public service is a community good, and it is appropriate for the community both to encourage young people to choose public service careers and to ensure that those who have chosen those careers are not burdened by crippling student loan debt. Project 2025 disagrees. It calls for eliminating the program, stating simply, the public service loan program, which prioritizes government and public sector work over private sector employment, should be terminated. In May 2024, the Biden-Harris administration approved $6.1 billion in student loan discharge for students who attended the predatory art institutes. The art institutes made, quote, pervasive and substantial misrepresentations to prospective students about post-graduation employment rates, salaries, and career services. That $6.1 billion discharge brought the administration's total forgiveness rate to $28.7 billion for students who were either cheated by their schools or saw their institutions precipitously close. This loan forgiveness for students who had been defrauded by their schools was made possible due to the Obama-era borrower defense rule, which gave the Department of Education broad authority to forgive loans for students whose colleges engaged in fraud, requiring borrowers only prove they'd attended a school that was later accused of wrongdoing. In a 2016 press statement announcing the new rule, then Secretary of Education John B. King Jr. explained it this way. Since taking office, the Obama administration has worked tirelessly to protect students and taxpayers and crack down on dodgy schools. Today's regulations build on that progress by ensuring that students who are lied to and mistreated by their school get the relief they are owed, and that schools that harm students are held responsible for their behavior. Project 2025 would rescind this rule, and, reading from Project 2025 now, instead the department should be authorized to discharge loans only in instances where clear and convincing evidence exists to demonstrate that an educational institution engaged in fraud toward a borrower in connection with his or her enrollment in the institution and the student's educational program or activity at the institution. The language here is a little ambiguous, but what it sounds like Project 2025 is advocating is instead of providing broad forgiveness to all students with loans from a fraudulent institution, requiring each individual student to prove his or her case that they personally were defrauded. This Project 2025 proposal sounds like the 2019 borrower defense rule that was adopted under President Trump's Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Under DeVos's rule, Each individual borrower had to prove their claim, even if there was evidence of widespread institutional malfeasance. It was not enough to prove that the institution made false statements to potential students, but it had to be proven that the false statements were made with knowledge that they were false, or that they acted with reckless disregard to the truth. The DeVos rule left unforgiven 85% of the debt that would have been discharged under the more liberal Obama-era policy. Let's listen to Democratic Representative Susie Lee's 2020 speech on the House floor, explaining the harm of the DeVos borrower defense rule to borrowers who were victims of predatory institutions.
I am here today for one reason: to ask that my colleagues in the House stand with me to make clear to the American people that we care more about defending students than enriching predatory schools. That is what my bill, House Joint Resolution 76, is all about. In 1992, Congress added a rule known as borrower defense to the Higher Education Act to give students the legal right to seek forgiveness on their federal student loans because of fraud by their schools. Predatory school misconduct in the 80s was so rampant, it was painfully clear to Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between that we need protections in place for students who are scammed and cheated by their institution. And that's just as true today. Corinthian colleges, ITT Tech, University of Phoenix, Dream Center, 350,000 students have filed claims alleging they were defrauded by these schools. They were lied to about the job prospects they'd get from these schools. They were lied to about the transferability of their credits, and they were lied to about the quality of education they'd receive. The only thing they got was a useless degree and a mountain of debt after these schools abruptly closed and because of rampant misconduct. The most painful part is that these are mostly students from low-income communities, people of color, and veterans. These are Americans we should be standing up for, not taking advantage of. In 2016, the last administration created a new borrower defense rule to streamline the process to help these students. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, not to Betsy DeVos. She then rewrote the borrower defense rule to make it almost impossible for a defrauded student to get relief on their student loans. Even in cases where schools clearly violated the law, the burden of proof on defrauded students is so absurdly unrealistic that that student would need to hire a team of lawyers to have a shot at proving intent and misconduct from the school.
Ultimately, bipartisan majorities in the House and the Senate enacted legislation to overturn the DeVos rule. But after Trump vetoed the legislation, the DeVos rule remained in effect until it was rescinded by the Biden-Harris administration. Project 2025 would bring back DeVos's idea of putting a substantial burden of proof on each individual borrower and potentially cut billions of dollars in anticipated debt relief. Now let's talk about income-driven repayment programs. Income-driven repayment, or IDR programs, are student loan repayment programs based on the income of the borrower, rather than a flat monthly rate based on the balance of the loan. For example, the Biden administration's SAVE program is an IDR program that requires borrowers to pay 5 to 10% of their discretionary income. That is 5 to 10% of the income that exceeds 225% of the poverty line. Project 2025 seeks to eliminate all existing IDR plans, including the SAVE program, calling them overly generous and complaining that they require only a token repayment. Project 2025 then calls for the creation of a new IDR plan, which would increase monthly payments to 10% of discretionary income and decrease the income exemption from 225% of the poverty line to the poverty line itself. According to the Center for American Progress, under Project 2025's proposed changes, student loan payments for many borrowers would more than triple. If we can look at this chart for a bit, we can see that the average payments for those who did not complete a degree would rise from $78 to $308. Payments from those with an associate's degree would rise from $93 to $337. Payments from those with a bachelor's degree would rise from $187 to $525. and payments from those who earned a master's degree would rise from $407 to $631. With the decrease of the income exemption to the poverty line, borrowers making as little as $15,000 per year would have to begin making payments. All existing IDR plans include an element of debt relief. For borrowers who make on-time monthly payments for a period of 20 to 25 years, depending on the payment program, the balance of the loan is forgiven. Project 2025 seeks to eliminate this loan forgiveness, stating, if new legislation is possible, there should be no loan forgiveness. In the absence of new legislation, Project 2025 advocates for extending payment periods to the statutory limit of 25 years. But let's imagine for a moment that the legislation eliminating forgiveness was enacted by taking a look at a scenario depicted by the Center for American Progress. I'm going to read directly from the article. A typical Black K-12 classroom teacher with graduate debt who began repayment in 2024 would see their balance grow for the first 8 years of repayment, even as they made payments under the Project 2025 plan. Starting with a median debt of about $70,000 for their graduate and undergraduate education, but seeing a starting salary of only around $52,000, this teacher's monthly payment the first year of repayment would be $308, a substantial sum, yet not enough to cover the $325 that accrues in interest every month. Because Project 2025 would also eliminate the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program and the maximum repayment terms on IDR plans, this teacher would pay for a total of 27 years. Under Project 2025 policies, this teacher would ultimately pay about $150,000, more than double their original principal. The Biden administration's SAVE plan includes an interest benefit. Here's how it works. Reading now from the Department of Education's website. If you make your full monthly payment, but it is not enough to cover the accrued monthly interest, the government covers the rest of the interest that accrued that month. This means that the SAVE plan prevents your balance from growing due to unpaid interest. To go back to our teacher who ended up paying $150,000 under the Project 2025 plan, here's how they would fare under the SAVE plan. Reading now from the Center for American Progress. By contrast, under the SAVE plan, this K-12 teacher would have a $117 monthly payment, and the additional $150 to $200 in interest that accrued each month would be waived to prevent the outstanding balance from growing. A borrower's payments would increase over time as their income grows, and therefore eventually cover higher shares of the interest. If this teacher qualified for public service loan forgiveness, they would pay $17,000 over 10 years. If they did not, they would pay a total of $56,000 over 25 years under the SAVE plan. In both cases, their monthly loan payments would go entirely to interest, and the remaining original principal of about $70,000 would be canceled. The Project 2025 plan, in contrast, would eliminate the interest subsidy and bring back what the Center for American Progress calls the ballooning balances of the past, even for those making decades of on-time monthly payments. The Project 2025 IDR plan, the one that stipulates payments of 10% of all income above the poverty level, no interest benefit, and no loan forgiveness, is actually not the first choice of Project 2025. According to the plan, the very first choice of how to manage federal student loans is to eliminate them altogether. According to Project 2025, the federal government does not have the proper incentives to make sound lending decisions, so the new administration should consider returning to a system in which private lenders, backed by government guarantees, would compete to offer student loans, including subsidized and unsubsidized loans. But even proponents of student loan privatization, like Beth Ackers, Preston Cooper, and Joe Pitts of the conservative American Enterprise Institute, think a system where private loans are backed by the federal government is a recipe for disaster. They write, but lawmakers who want to pursue privatization must avoid several traps. They should avoid any form of federal guarantees for private student loans, as these transfer the risk of default from the lender to the taxpayer. A return to the Federal Family Education Loan Program, for instance, when the federal government guaranteed private loans, should be discouraged. Such arrangements enable lenders to reap all the rewards but bear none of the consequences of making bad loans. That removes most of the incentive for lenders to ensure loan dollars only flow to quality education. In other words, the Project 2025 plan for federally backed private loans socializes the risks of lending while privatizing the rewards. To recap, the enactment of Project 2025 would mean the total overhaul of the federal student loan program as we know it. There would be no public service loan forgiveness, no interest subsidies, and no loan forgiveness after decades of on-time payments. And if Project 2025 has its way, there's a possibility that the entire federal student loan program could be eliminated entirely. But Project 2025 isn't the only threat to the existing federal student loan infrastructure. Currently, in response to a lawsuit from 7 Republican-led states, the SAVE program has been blocked by a federal injunction. According to reporting by Forbes, the lawsuit could result in the elimination of not just the SAVE program, but also loan forgiveness under other IDR plans. If this were to happen, the only remedy would be congressional action enacting the programs into crystal clear legislation. And even if Congress were to enact such legislation, it could be vetoed by a president beholden to the Project 2025 agenda. But why are we concerned with student loans at all? Aren't they just private contracts for individuals to take on a debt obligation in exchange for their personal benefit? Well, that's certainly the way Project 2025 views it. There are repeated references in the document to the, quote, student loan portfolio, which the document calls, quote, a substantial taxpayer asset, as though taxpayers are cold economic calculators, viewing student debt as a source of potential revenue and nothing more. An alternate and more traditional from a historical perspective way to view it is this: student debt isn't the asset. Student education is. Traditionally, the United States has invested heavily in public colleges and universities, with the idea that an educated populace was key to maintaining functioning democratic institutions, a healthy economy, and economic mobility. It wasn't until the 1980s that the country began its disinvestment in higher education, with state and local funding of public colleges and universities decreasing by 25% between 1988 and 2018. During this period of disinvestment, public four-year institution tuition rates have drastically increased, rising 179.2% over the past 20 years. In other countries as well, higher education has traditionally been seen as a public good, with everywhere from Mexico to New Zealand, 46 countries in total, offering tuition-free higher education to their citizens. There's evidence that this perspective of higher education as a public good is still the majority position of Americans, with 65% of the public supporting some form of student loan forgiveness. Right now, we have a choice to support policies that view higher education as a private benefit or even a luxury item, available to only the few who can afford it, or to support policies that view it as a public good, beneficial to society as a whole. Project 2025 makes its view clear. To learn more about Project 2025 and what it means for the issues that matter most to you, visit the links in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. To support the Fair Share files and free content about economic justice, click the link in the description and sign up for Patreon. Patrons will receive access to scripts with citations and resources for further research. Members who join at the founding patron tier will receive a credit at the end of every episode.